All right, a little special edition here this evening. I got a great question from Raphael, and he said, if, what were some works, 10, he said, because 10 seems to be the magic number, so we'll go with 10, that you would recommend for someone who's just getting into philosophy, that are, that aren't going to kill you, right? So like this, the problem with trying to read Hegel is he's just trying to kill you. And it's not a friendly work to begin with. Important, but not friendly. So what are some sort of accessible works that are still key to try and get our thinking together, and will help you get an introduction to philosophy? And I mentioned this on my lecture on Schopenhauer, that often educational institutions err on the side of giving you the most difficult, most impenetrable, least friendly works possible, when in fact there are many, many very accessible, very direct works that you can begin reading. And really, I mean, basically, you can stop reading with them too. I mean, by the time I finished this list, I thought, man, you can go a long ways in your thinking, just with these works. And this is idiosyncratic. I could probably, I know, I definitely could eliminate these 10 works and suggest a different 10. If I did this in a year, I'd probably rearrange them, right? So, this isn't a particularly, this isn't some the absolute truth. This is just a suggestion that you for books that you could consider. And my only real rules were: one, relatively short, relatively easily accessible in the sense of their writing style and the presentation. And I wanted actual works, not summaries or discussions or histories of. I mean, I love those, don't get me wrong, but I think often we tend to spend a little too much time in secondary and tertiary sources rather than just getting in there and reading the works themselves. So here's a collection of relatively short, relatively accessible works that have proven to be significant and appealing and easy to access, and in many ways just, I think, great. So let's start. And this is in no particular order, by the way. So, just this sort of, this isn't going from the best to the worst or the most important, least important, or anything like that. This is just sort of a random list here. So, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So this sort of helps get you into the Roman, Latin school of philosophy, obviously one of the key works of Stoicism, so beautifully written, so clear, that it sort of makes me not want to read the other Stoics. Basically, I mean, Epictetus and stuff, great. Seneca, yeah, absolutely. But the Meditations. So the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, I would recommend the George Long translation. Although your mileage may vary. I think that's a good one to look for. Although if you can't find a particular translation, other ones are fine. I mean, these are just preferred, generally speaking. I think Ecce Homo by Friedrich Nietzsche. I was going to suggest Thus Spake Zarathustra, but I decided it's kind of too long and just too crazy. But Ecce Homo is crazy, but much shorter. Kaufmann translation. In fact, Kaufmann version of this is very accessible. Great notes, great introduction. Is it the Kaufmann I have? Now that I think about it, it may not be the Kaufmann translation. I have it around here someplace. I may have to check on that and get back to you, but it's the Ecce Homo by Nietzsche. Actually, now that I think about it, I don't think it is the Kaufmann translation. I have a different one. Lives of Eminent Philosophers by Diogenes Laertius. And again, the Charles Duke Yonge, I think, translation maybe is the one to look for here. This is a bit of a cheat, having just said not secondary. This is, of course, a review of philosophers by somebody else, but the problem is most of the texts and most of the philosophers you review, we don't have any other texts available, or just fragments, or not too much. So it's sort of our prime source for a lot of these people, but it is a great review, and there's just so many nuggets in there. Some sections aren't that interesting, but some sections are really, you're just so gripping and so interesting. So I think you'll find that entertaining. It's there's just so much good material in there. Also, the nice thing is it can be read in snippets. You can pick one life, and some of the lives are only a page, 2 pages, and some are longer. But you can read more or less and put it down, pick it up. You don't have to. It's not one you have to read all the way through. Got to have some Plato, of course. So I was going to plunk for the Symposium and the Phaedrus. Both of them are a little hard to get into. The Symposium, sort of takes a while to get rolling. Phaedrus similarly, but if you think of them more as plays than as like serious philosophical arguments, I think it's a little easier to get into them. I mean, they have people talking, and they're late for a party, and where's Socrates? And I was invited by Socrates, and now I'm here on my own, and that's kind of awkward, right? So that's the beginning of the Symposium, and so you have these non-philosophical aspects that are important. Generally, I'm going to just go with Jowett. I know there's more recent, more precisely correct translations, but boy, his English is good. I mean, he wrote a sentence that had punch. So I would say go with Jowett. Readings in classical Chinese philosophy. So this is a cheat because this has Confucius, Lao Tzu, Chuang Tzu, Mencius, and a couple, Hu Shi, I think, is in there. A few other ones are in there. And this is, so it is a collection. So again, a bit of a cheat, but again, it's all of Chinese philosophy. So hey, feel free. Most of these works are shorter. Or a selection. So, and again, you can read a little bit, read a chapter or two. I would say most importantly is the Lao Tzu. I mean, that's the one, and then Confucius, through 1, 2, 2, 1. I don't know, but as you get an introduction to sort of the Chinese philosophical tradition, those two are right there. It's the Van Norden Ivanhoe edition. They just apparently updated it. I didn't know they had. I was just checking on that one to see if it was still available, and hey, it's been updated. So it's been around for must be 20 years at least, maybe longer. Feel like I'm getting old. Yeah, it's just a nice collection. There's other selections that you can have, and there's other collections, but that's a nice one. Good notes, etc. Schopenhauer, Essays and Aphorisms. This is a Penguin collection. It's a Hollingsdale translation, not the best translation, by the way, but this is a great collection, and it's in the Penguin edition, so it's easy to get. And it's a nice selection of his essays and aphorisms. So, and again, these are short, all kinds of things to read about from Schopenhauer, and very accessible, very clear, and very sort of it's Schopenhauer, so there's kind of this, this aggressiveness, this bit of a drive in there all the time. That's quite entertaining, and it's selections from his Prolegomena collections, of which there's 2 different ones that have almost the same name, and I was getting confused. But anyway, so he wrote a lot of essays, and Penguin has done a pretty nice job of selecting those out, I would say. In a similar vein, William James' Pragmatism and Other Writings, again, a Penguin classic. That one is, again, great selections from some of his lectures that he delivered and some of his other writings and excerpts from complete writings. And I think really gives a sense both of his philosophical outlook, and importantly, you can see how influential his ideas have been, because a lot of ideas that we have that we think, this is just American way of thinking or something like that, really, you go, wait, there it is. James is articulating it. He's really the person. It's not that he created all this on his own. Some of he did, some of he didn't. But he really translated a lot of philosophical thought sort of into the American idiom, as it were. And so he's really important and influential for that reason. And, and the clarity of his thinking and writing is stupendous. Rene Descartes' Discourse on Method, and other writings. Again, Penguin classic. It's a nice translation, by the way, this one from the French. And there it is. Descartes, how can you go wrong? You can, of course, Cartesian dualism has been, lots of criticism of it, et cetera, et cetera. But if you have an intellectual context with the background the Penguin gives you to help understand why he was making the arguments and the way he was, how this fits into the history of Aristotelianism and being at war with the traditional medieval church, it makes a lot more sense on what he was trying to accomplish and why he was trying to think this way. Descartes' Discourse on Methods and Other Writings. So there's a quick list. Most of these are, either the entire book is under 100 pages or the selections that you can read are, maybe 5 or 10 pages at most, short ones, long ones. But These are easily digestible, something you can read in one sitting or two sittings and get a good chapter or an essay or, a collection of parables all down. You can take some notes, you can ponder, you can think. It's not something where you have to have sustained attention over 5 or 6 months to try and work through. This is the problem with Aristotle, right? He just kills you, grinds you down with, great stuff like Nicomachean Ethics and, his just so many. It's just great, his ethics, and other writings, by the way. But they're all immense, and they all just you just have to have this sustained concentration. And it's a rough go, I would say, but not these selections. Most of them, like I said, you can sit down, you can read them in an hour or two at most, take notes, go back. What I like about them is they're short and you can reread them at one sitting, which I always find hugely helpful. And then you're off and rolling. So last note on this, I would say many of these works have great introductions and great footnotes. If you haven't read the books before, I would say always recommend reading the material itself first, because if it has an author's introduction, that's okay. But if it has an introduction from someone who's edited these collections, which most of these will have, forget all that. You come to it with your mind for the first time and take what you get from it. Because what happens is when you get someone else's introduction, particularly these very convincing and knowledgeable scholars, there's a reason they're editing these works, right? Because they're serious thinkers. It sort of preloads your thinking. So you see the things they suggested you're going to see because somebody just suggested you would see that. And you may not be as aware or pick up on some other elements that might be equally important or maybe just interesting to you because you have this other voice in your head. So you're going to encounter one of the great philosophical historical voices already. And I think for the first run through, just sit down with them and start that dialogue, start that questioning, answering back and forth, taking notes. And then after you've gone through a section or gone through maybe the whole work, depending on how long it is, then you can stop and go, okay, now I want to go back and read the introduction. And sometimes you'll go, oh, I got that wrong or whatever. But that's great. That's fine. But I think it's better to be, have your own insights, some of which turn out not to be that great first, rather than have someone else filter all that out for you and kind of preload your mind. And so then you're reading to be, right in the sense of, oh, now I see I'm agreeing with the person who wrote the preface, right? Then I don't think that's great at all. So if you're going to sit down with the classics, I'd say the first time you go through them, just give it some time and do it with you. You encounter it with a clean mind, one of these great minds from the past. And how bad can it be? It's going to be great, I would say. So great question, Raphael. I worked with Milo on creating this list. We had a nice long argument and discussion, and it was very helpful. And so thank you very much. And I hope anybody who reads some of these will enjoy it and tell me if you hated or loved the works. Oh, also tell me what I forgot, because I know, when you do these things, God, you forgot something. And or probably 5 things. I'm going, oh, I really should have included that. So thank you.